Virginia Woolf, Clarissa and Septimus.
"Nonsense! Nonsense!" she cried to herself, pushing through the swing doors of Mulberry's, the florist's. She advanced, light, tall, very upright, to be greeted at once by button-faced Miss Pym, whose hands were always bright red, as if they had been stood in cold water with the flowers. There were flowers, delphiniums, sweet peas, bunches of lilac, and carnations, masses of carnations. There were roses, there were irises. Ah, yes. So she breathed in the earthy garden's sweet smell as she stood talking to Miss Pym, who owed her help, and thought her kind, for kind she had been years ago. Very kind. But she looked older this year, turning her head from side to side among the irises and roses and nodding tufts of lilac with her eyes half closed, snuffing in, after the street uproar, the delicious scent, the exquisite coolness. And then, opening her eyes, how fresh, like frilled linen, clean from a laundry laid in wicker trays, the roses looked, and dark and prim the red carnations, holding their heads up, and all the sweet peas spreading in their bowls, tinged violet, snow-white, pale, as if it were the evening, and girls in muslin frocks came out to pick sweet peas and roses after the superb summer's day, with its almost blue-black sky, its delphiniums, its carnations, its arum lilies was over. And it was the moment between 6 and 7 when every flower, roses, carnations, irises, lilac, glows. White, violet, red deep orange, every flower seems to burn by itself, softly, purely in the misty beds. And how she loved the grey-white moths spinning in and out over the cherry pie, over the evening primroses. And as she began to go with Miss Pym from jar to jar, choosing, "Nonsense, nonsense," she said to herself, more and more gently, as if this beauty, this scent, this colour, and Miss Pym liking her, trusting her, were a wave which she let flow over her, and surmount that hatred, that monster, surmount it all. And it lifted her up and up when... Oh! A pistol shot in the street outside. "Dear, those motor cars," said Miss Pym, going to the window to look, and coming back and smiling apologetically with her hands full of sweet peas, as if those motor cars, those tires of motor cars, were all her fault. The violent explosion which made Mrs. Dalloway jump and Miss Pym go to the window and apologize came from a motor car which had drawn to the side of the pavement precisely opposite Mulberry's shop window. Passers-by, who, of course, stopped and stared, had just time to see a face of the very greatest importance against the dove-grey upholstery before a male hand drew the blind, and there was nothing to be seen except a square of dove-grey. Yet rumours were at once in circulation from the middle of Bond Street to Oxford Street on one side, to Atkinson's scent shop on the other, passing invisibly, inaudibly like a cloud, swift, veil-like upon hills, falling indeed with something of a cloud's sudden sobriety and stillness upon faces which, a second before, had been utterly disorderly. But now, mystery had brushed them with her wing. They had heard the voice of authority. The spirit of religion was abroad, with her eyes bandaged tight and her lips gaping wide. But nobody knew whose face had been seen. Was it the Prince of Wales's, the Queen's, the Prime Minister's? Whose face was it? Nobody knew. Edgar J. Watkiss, with his roll of lead piping round his arm, said audibly, humorously, of course, "The Prime Minister's car." Septimus Warren Smith, who found himself unable to pass, heard him. Septimus Warren Smith, aged about 30, pale-faced, beak-nosed, wearing brown shoes and a shabby overcoat, with hazel eyes, which had that look of apprehension in them which makes complete strangers apprehensive too. The world has raised its whip. Where will it descend? Everything had come to a standstill. The throb of the motor engine sounded like a pulse irregularly drumming through an entire body. The sun became extraordinarily hot because the motor car had stopped outside Mulberry's shop window. Old ladies on the tops of omnibuses spread their black parasols. Here a green, here a red parasol opened with a little pop. Mrs. Dalloway, coming to the window with her arms full of sweet peas, looked out with her little pink face pursed in inquiry. Everyone looked at the motor car. Septimus looked. Boys on bicycles sprang off. Traffic accumulated. And there the motor car stood with drawn blinds, and upon them a curious pattern like a tree, Septimus thought, and this gradual drawing together of everything to one centre before his eyes, as if some horror had come almost to the surface and was about to burst into flames, terrified him. The world wavered and quivered and threatened to burst into flames. It is I who am blocking the way, he thought. Was he not being looked at and pointed at? Was he not weighted there, rooted to the pavement for a purpose? But for what purpose? "Let us go on, Septimus," said his wife, a little woman with large eyes and a sallow, pointed face, an Italian girl. But Lucretia herself could not help looking at the motor car and the tree pattern on the blinds. Was it the Queen in there? The Queen going shopping? The chauffeur, who had been opening something, turning something, shutting something, got onto the box. "Come on," said Lucretia. But her husband, for they had been married 4 or 5 years now, jumped, started, and said, "All right," angrily, as if she had interrupted him. People must notice, people must see. People, she thought, looking at the crowd staring at the motor car. The English people with their children and their horses and their clothes, which she admired in a way, but they were people now, because Septimus had said, "I will kill myself." An awful thing to say. Suppose they had heard him. She looked at the crowd. Help! Help! She wanted to cry out to butchers' boys and women, "Help!" Only last autumn, she and Septimus had stood on the embankment, wrapped in the same cloak, and Septimus, reading a paper instead of talking, she had snatched it from him and laughed in the old man's face who saw them. But failure one conceals. She must take him away into some park. "Now we will cross," she said. She had a right to his arm, though it was without feeling. He would give her, who was so simple, so impulsive, only 24, without friends in England, who had left Italy for his sake, a piece of bone.